like 5:07, and I think we'll approve. We're not going to approve minutes, or
I don't think so,
minutes to
no.
approve.
I think that's.
So I think we're going to go straight to Jerry.
Great, thank you very much for giving me a couple minutes tonight. I already passed up some package. This is introduced Greg Montgomery as our recommended applicant that would like to hire for our technology intervention specialist. This position is a new position to Oak Grove. However, it's part of our grant, so it's does not involve any local dollars at all. We had a committee, our technology committee. You'll see in the letter there's several people that were part of that, including Lyle Holiday. We interviewed 3 out of the 8 candidates that we had on School Spring. Greg currently is the technology integration specialist at Dover Elementary School. He does that part-time, comes very highly recommended from Principal Bill Anton up there. He has a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Business Information Systems and a minor in Education from University of Massachusetts. Again, he's worked in the Vermont schools since 2007, and a lot of employment history in the business world prior to that. So I'm hoping that you will recommend Mr. Greg Montgomery. Oh, he's also an Oak Grove grad. So he is, yes. So he does live in Brattleboro, and he commutes up over the mountain to help out with Dover. When I talked to Bill Anton, he's like, because of Greg, they were able to really move forward with their technology. He feels that his teacher, it's just part of their everyday fabric of their school now is using technology every day. So his whole packet's there, his letter, a brief resume that he provided, a couple letters of recommendation, as well at the very back is the copy of a portion of the grant.
I'm just curious, Jerry, if Dover is going to look then for somebody else, or are they done with their education or technology?
No, actually, we're probably hoping to going to work out some hours so that it will be kind of a shared position. And he's very interested in staying at Dover. He's made a big commitment there. I think he's doing like 15 hours a week with Dover right now. We're hoping between 15 to 20 hours a week within Oak Grove. And if the grant continues into the oncoming years, he is very interested in having Oak Grove and Dover be kind of his 2 families, and even being able to do some district collaborative here.
So we need an actual motion to approve this grant. So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. We're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Frank, just making a few extra copies.
Okay, so here comes a single sheet around. It's a double-sided.
Is it bigger than that?
Yeah, going as big as we can. Just a single sheet. Okay, we got that down there. Polly, I'm sure Polly has been following the light. Sure, there we go.
This one thing will make a lawyer.
Yeah. All right, so if I could spend just a moment on this document, and then I'll hand around another document, and then if you'd like a third document, let's see. So this single sheet is the revenue, and probably more importantly is the tax estimate. It's basically what I had sent you on, I think it was maybe the 9th. But I added 2 things. I added the VUHS pro rata tax allocation, the weighted tax allocation, and then I also added a column in the far right side of this.
1 second.
This document.
Paula, there's no reason you can't jump at the table here.
Okay.
You're the only one here. Come on up. be able to hear, whatever.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're looking at this document here. And on the far right, this is the first pass at the state statistics that takes into account the current indices that the legislature has set or the tax commissioner has recommended, and then applies our proposed budget to those funding formula indices, and we now have our first pass at a projected tax rate. So the very first box there on the far left is a series of numbers 1 through 39, so I'll refer to those just to help you find your way in this difficult document. So box number 1 is the $16,037,000 is the proposed draft budget that I had sent out earlier, and I have another document to share with you on that. We have our $2,578,000 at line 10. Those would be revenues that reduce spending for purposes of calculating what the state calls net education spending. So when we get to line 14, that's our net education spending. We divide it by this significantly larger equalized student number that we were not expecting to see back when we saw the preliminary numbers on December 7th. These numbers came out relatively recently from the AOE, and it's a result of review of the universal pre-K law that's going into effect for the first time in fiscal year 17, and it's accounting for estimated students that will access pre-K next year.
That's 55 more students, 55
So that's on line 15. You see we're going from 821 to 876. So that's a 6.8% increase.
If it weren't equalized people, with the 55, you said, what would our number be? Thank you. Could we have an actual number? Because what I remember of actual numbers is we're down about 50 or 54.
Oh, well, these are the numbers that
Without the
drive
pre-K,
that.
right?
That's right.
I think the number that I
That's right.
remember seeing was without the pre-K.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a reflection of not only estimating kids that are going to access pre-K, it's also including the EES kids that we've talked about, early education services students that we know about, and for the first time the local school budget has to pay $3,092 for each one of those students. So that's a significant increase of students. And that's why we have the significant increase in expense that goes with it. Okay. In general, we've seen sort of the opposite, which is enrollment declining, but our budget staying essentially the same. And when we get to the next number, which is the cost per student, that creates a higher and higher tax rate. In this scenario, this is the first time in a long time where student enrollment has increased by a larger percentage than our budget proposal. So that's why our cost per student is going to go down substantially from what it would have been if we still had the 821 kids that we had current year. Okay. So with this budget proposal, spending and revenue assumptions that we have so far in the draft format, line 16 is our equalized spending per student, $15,348. That compares to $15,573. That's down 1.4%. And the threshold that the legislature set for each school, it's a unique number for each school, is the next number, line 25, 15,804. So you see we're significantly under that. We're approximately, what's that, about $450 per student under. the cap. We were concerned about that when we get the draft numbers, the draft equalized student numbers, we were over that. But when we add so many kids, we have now a very favorable financial situation. Our tax rate is on line 29. We go from $1.63, you see that in the comparison box, it's 1.6299. And we go down to 1.55, and then we have another favorable statistic that's out of our control. It's the CLA, as it relates to a tax rate. Our CLA, common level of appraisal, on line 32 has increased from 102% to 103.29, so that again lowers our tax rate. So when we finish with these state statistics, we are at the pre-K through 6 Brattleboro Town School District tax rate of 80 cents, and that's because 53% of our kids are here, so we take 53% of the $1.55, and that's the weighted tax rate for this school system. Then we look at the high school. 46% of our kids are at the high school, so we take 46% of their tax rate, and that number is 82 cents. We add the two numbers together. By the way, that was on line 37. Okay. Then we add our 80 cents or 82 cents, and our high school 82 cents, and we get the $1.65. Line 38, and then we apply the common level of appraisal to both of those numbers, and we go from okay. So then we apply the CLA adjusted tax rate, and that's the number that shows up in the mailbox if someone is paying the full tax rate. $1.59, and that's down from $1.67 for a reduction of 4.8%. So these are estimates all based on those indices that the state has given us so far in our draft budget at this time. But the equalized student number is what they call frozen. It's done. That won't change. So there's a quick overview of sort of the financial impact of our current draft.
That's good news for our tax rate. It's bad news for the town that we have so many that we're going up in equalized student, unless it's really just because we're adding kids.
It's primarily because we're adding. Universal preschool is bringing. It's on the surface, it's a simple concept, but when you get into the mechanics of it, it's a little bit complicated. But basically what's happening is we're bringing in many new students at an average cost of $3,092. Our normal cost is around $15,000. So when you increase student enrollment, but that increase carries a substantially lower cost than what you're used to, that drives your overall cost per student down. And that's what's happening to us this year.
And will that happen again next year? This is a one-time
It's kind of a
thing.
one-time thing.
This is a one-time thing.
And is there any reason, good or bad, any advantage or disadvantage of the increase that we're putting into this budget this year? We can do it because of the equalized pupil.
That's right. So we've added
It's a substantial.
food service, about $45,000. We added a significant amount to the preschool to match those additional students with a $3,092 tuition payment. So we have those matching up. And then we added $400,000 to the capital reserve. So that's a new appropriation in the general fund that we would apply for that capital plan that we looked at, which, as you know, that would easily exceed $1 million if we did everything that we said we'd like to do, which is, number one, replace this heating system, address the potential for a classroom at Academy or two for early education. So yes, it's a one-time opportunity to make that investment because we think it's unlikely that we'll see this. We think we're going to see the same trend continue, which is either flat or declining enrollment statistics, as we've seen for many years.
And then perhaps I'm the only one confused on this exactly, but talk to me about the $3,092 tuition and what happens in a practical standpoint. There's 55 kids.
So we're gonna show you that in the budget, like what we had as a line item the previous year to what we need to plug in because of new.
I want to know where they are physically.
Yeah, they're in the partnerships that we have to use.
So that means that we're actually going to give away 3,000, or we're funneling
As we have
3,000.
always, when we get the benefit of the student count, the ADN, we have always given, the law was that we would provide, I think last year it was $3,000 per student to those preschool providers. That's the partnership that we've been in for 8 years. So the law requires a little bump up in that, almost to the 100. But the good news is that we're able to count these students. In the past, they haven't been counted.
So it still has nothing to do with that Act 166 funding.
Well, that is the law.
That's the
is-
law that
Yeah,
requires this.
it requires it. So it does have a lot to do with that.
And we don't have a major impact from that because we've been having those preschool partnerships all along. Districts that haven't done that and then the law forced them to do it had a huge impact to their overall budgets. So we've been doing it incrementally, so it's been good for our early students, been good for the providers, good for parents. So now it's a little bit better this year
For us.
for us and for the taxpayers.
Maybe everybody else had that. Go ahead, Paul.
So am I understanding correctly that we're getting, when the state does its equalized pupil calculation, does it take into account the fact that those are only 10-hour-a-week kids?
Yes.
Okay, so I was confused because I thought we were getting, like paying $3,092 but getting credit for $15,000, but
Yeah, so
now I
the
understand. Yep.
full-time equivalent would be more like
Okay.
6,000, but it's still substantially
Right.
low.
Yeah, thanks.
And it would make sense, right? Because as you're saying, it's a 10-hour week versus our normal school day. So you know,
Right.
it makes sense
Yeah.
that it's only 3,000 as opposed to.
Now, Fred, I know you said that the equalized students is set, but what about the CLA? Can that be changed, or is that number set
It
now?
can be changed, but it's not likely. If the town office receives a lot of appeals, to the grand list assessments, then it could change, but it's not typical that it changes much.
That percentage goes up, but, do I have this right? But it goes up because the property values have gone down.
That's right, yeah, so that's the mixed bag there. It's good for setting a tax rate, but if you're selling property, it means that we are continuing this decline in the Brattleboro grand list that some of us have seen as the Act 46 data set that we've shared. It's a significant and steady trend down. Thank you, my computer needed to be rehabbed.
Sorry.
Benny, did it close up?
Yep, it should be good.
All right, thanks a lot.
We got a name tag if you'd like to stay.
I have a cold doggy in the car.
So one last question, just because of Act 46 in general, but are we the only district in our supervisory union, or is everybody seeing this?
The elementary schools have seen this, well, not to that extent. But a smaller district, 5 additional students have a pretty significant impact. So, yeah, we have seen it.
Yeah, all the elementary schools. Unfortunately, the high school is the opposite. It was a decline in equalized students, so there was a lot of...
We can't get the high school to include their preschools. So wait.
Yeah.
There is a preschool there.
And we come.
But we count it.
We come. The high school. All right, so we're gonna go to the meeting.
Yes. No, here it is.
Oh, thank you.
That sidetrack. Okay, so this document, no change to the fiscal year. This one is an 8-page document, it's expenditures. So no change to the fiscal year 17, the proposed budget that I had sent you by email. We did make an adjustment to fiscal year 16, which it just reflects as we have generally state grants, and some of them are federal grants, we make amended grant applications, and when those amendments come through, we adjust our budget for internal control. So if you looked at the two documents, you would see no change to fiscal year 17, but you would see fiscal year 16 was actually reduced a little bit. But to point out the changes that Ron was just describing there on page 1, so the pre-K number and the significant increase is right there on the third line down on the spending numbers. We have salaries, benefits, and then contracted services. And in the first page is your district-wide programs for the school system, and it's the instructional or generally classroom instruction. So the third line down, contracted services, is that tuition payment. And actually for preschool, it's not really tuition because it's a service. It's a professional service they're providing. And you see we're going from our current budget of $415,000 to $547,000, up $132,000, and that reflects the review of what we're estimating for pre-K enrollment increases and the additional $92 per student that the state is requiring. The other thing I'll just mention is I'm recommending that we just publish this summary document for the reason that we've talked about, but I'll just kind of maybe remind you is that you can relatively easily identify instruction, student support, administration, facility, transportation, and debt by each school in this report. And that mirrors the state data collection format for all public schools. And by presenting information in this format, it allows us to focus on the key functions, the key services that we provide to students, and also gives us a good opportunity to compare how we're doing against other schools. I do have the detailed document available. It's in the same format. It's just a 30-page document, and I find a lot of times folks get lost in that level of detail. So my recommendation would be to publish this in our town report, which I'll be going forward once you do your final budget vote, but maybe just keep that in mind, and of course it's your report, so we'll do what you would wish. As an aside, Brattleboro Union High School Board is happy to go with a 7 or 8 page summary, very much like this, in lieu of what traditionally has been a 40-page financial statement of lots of detail. Any other questions in our district-wide programs on that first page? And if not, I'll go to the next. Okay, so as I said, in district-wide, we're looking at instruction, student support services, which is primarily our guidance. The 2,200 there is services generally is a professional development. The 2,300 is the SU assessment, which is very flat, 0.4% change. And then we go to page 5 in the district-wide, page 2 in the district-wide, and we're into the services for maintenance that are not specific to one building. So this is primarily services for the Estes-Ville, the Canal Street, and what am I forgetting? What's the third? There's another one. Powers House. Yes, I knew.
Frank, why is it the other purchase services down by 73.3 or 98,000?
That's, I think, we may recall, I think all of the workers' comp was in there, and I put the workers' comp, it's a percentage of payroll, so I've allocated it to each payroll cost center. So it's not really a reduction, it's just a aligning. There's our transportation for district-wide, all of our students, and then we have the general assessment for special education also in district-wide. You see that on page 2 there. I think we spent a fair amount of time talking about that. I'm glad to review that if anyone would like to revisit it. And then food service is the other area on page 2, the last group in district-wide where we added, as I mentioned earlier, 45,000 to that, knowing that universal access to the food program, the federally subsidized food program is an option, and we're finding in some schools it's been very well received. So
what does that mean? Universal access is which meal?
Which one is that?
that's on page 2 at the almost the very last. It's that basically it's a local.
Yeah, so that is the universal food program. We felt like in order to allow this to happen, it would be an increase in cost and to improve the quality of food.
So what food is it?
It would be potentially breakfast and lunch. And we already have the universal after-school meals program.
So that means every kid gets free lunch?
Every kid can access breakfast and lunch.
And right now, every kid can do free breakfast? No.
No,
No.
you mean
We pay.
only children
Unless you're on a
whose
free-
families qualified for free reduced. Everyone else has to pay. So this would eliminate a pay for anyone.
For $45,000, because there's that much that would come in from the federal government.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's what we had to estimate. I felt like if we were going to move forward in this, cafe service is going to give us an estimate, but we also felt like we probably want to increase the food quality. So these are estimate numbers. I think that will cover us, but it may be that we're able to reduce it. But I think that's a
Taxpayers
great.
are going to pay less, and the taxpayers'
Yeah.
kids, and they're going to pay less during the year, too.
We're getting a lot from the federal government, so you're paying.
More federal tax. That's what it is.
That's what it comes from.
The federal tax.
Oh, this is all free.
Because it's just
There's no
elementary
free-
schools, obviously in this budget, but are you doing it at Sanford Middle School, High School?
The other thing that
True that, still pay that.
that this will address is that we have a significant number of households who don't qualify for free reduced because that threshold is pretty low. Who have perhaps as many as 2 or 3 children in school, and they have to pay for lunch, and they can't afford it. So, and then that places them in a position where sometimes the kids are eating and run up a pretty significant lunch bill, and parents don't have the ability to pay.
Which was one thing I looked for, didn't know where to find, Frank. We used to have the deficit. Is that gone now again?
Was that a student activity or one of those? We do have a
Food service
subsidy.
deficit.
In this same,
It's a subsidy.
yeah,
It came out of subsidy.
in this
Subsidy.
same cost group is the contribution to the food service, which would be essentially what cafe services is saying is operating loss. So in effect, it does subsidize exactly what, so that's probably is what you're you're looking for is, it's been 10,000.
So in actuality, we're putting in 45, but really it's only 35.
We're actually adding 45,
Yeah, adding 40.
because the 10 plus the 45 is 55,000.
Yeah.
So the 10 is still going to be coming out if we don't have 10.
Yeah, what we're estimating is this is an additional resource that we would need to get this program running.
Yeah, but if it's free, there's no deficit to pay.
No, there's still an operational cost that Cafe Service will assess us if,
So it's not the deficit of the kids who didn't
No.
pay, it's an
It's the whole
operational
program.
loss that shows up from there.
yeah,
But was there still not, I thought there was something in the budget for the operational, or the deficit line, when we had kids that didn't pay.
It came into the actual budget, but we didn't have a line for it.
If we exceeded that amount, which between the three schools, that's very possible, and some years we did, then Brattleboro Town School District has to make that money up. Catholic
Yeah.
Services doesn't eat it. No pun intended.
Uh,
We
Free lunch?
eat it.
Yeah.
yeah, and I would assume it would be charged to that line that we're looking at here on page 2. It's the one that says the 300 there, contracted services of professional and technical.
Some years it would run as high as $20,000.
That's my point here. So
Yeah.
if we-
Some years,
So we'll eliminate that.
So that would be an actual cost saving.
Right.
potential, yeah. Right, and also, if you look at time, bills get sent, home with
Yeah,
students.
exactly.
Initially, then they go home in the mail, there are phone calls, there's meetings with parents, there's effort to collect that amount of money, which is, I would suggest, is counterproductive to what we do as principals. It would be a nice thing not to have to do, to spend time pursuing folks who can't afford to pay for their children's lunch.
So no more peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or
It
cheese
wasn't peanut butter, it
sandwiches?
was cheese,
Cheese.
because the
Cheese
kids
sandwiches.
liked peanut butter, remember this? Going on, Frank.
So one other, the other significant change, and these are pretty much all of the changes, is also on page 2, and it is the appropriation for the reserve that we just talked about. So that's that line 5,300 where it says, other total, and that is 5,300 is your transfers to capital reserves. So you see our current budget was 76,000. That was for the Academy pellet boiler. And our earlier draft, the very first draft was, we took the 220,000 that we're not paying on the bond because it's been paid off. And we added that 400,000 to what we had previously put in there, which was the 220. So that's our increase there. You see of 620,000. But it's for a total commitment for capital improvements of 696,000.
So we felt this was a good year to plug that in.
And generally, when a bond is paid off, as we said before, it paid for an asset that many times only has a useful life of 20 or 30 years. So the fact that we paid that off, it means that asset was installed 20 years ago, and it probably needs to be maintained, or in some instances replaced, like roofing systems, and
That's on our capital plan.
that's in our capital plan. And we don't actually have a separate capital reserve. And if we want to go forward with this, we also would want to develop an article for our town meeting that asks the voters to authorize us to establish a reserve for capital. We do have one for general education, but we don't have one for capital.
Did you have a percentage in mind? That would be a percentage of the budget.
It would be this number, yeah, it would just be that number.
But for this year.
Yeah.
And then it would be a separate article every year, it wouldn't be a,
No, once you establish the fund,
okay.
then you can transfer money into it at your discretion. And it would be either a line item that you put in the budget as part of your discretion, or you're in May, you think you're going to have a fiscal year end surplus, and you'd like to reserve something for the capital plan. The board has the discretion to do that, because you can spend up to whatever the voters authorize. And if that includes taking 100,000 and putting it into your capital reserve, you can do that, but you have to have the electorate create that fund for you. You can't do that on your own.
And you'll have some moving for it.
We have that.
So do we need to have a motion to actually make that
No,
article?
not
When do we have to have this off in the town?
Next week.
Next week, so we get to look at, and we'll do the voting on the final budget next week too.
Yeah.
We'll do both of those at the same time.
So those are the major changes that we have, and despite these major changes, our tax rates are projected to be somewhat lower.
So the overall increase is 4.1%. So that seems high, but with the additional students and the lower tax rate, then this is a good year to.
And if we didn't do the amount into the reserve, where would we be? What would our percentage be?
It's about a penny per 100,000. So we would change the tax rate. We would if we remove 400,000, then we would lower the tax rate another 4 cents.
So I like that answer, except I wasn't really what I asked, or what I wanted to ask.
Oh.
Sorry, I wanted to know what our budget, if we said to the town, we're doing this 4%, 4.1%
Oh, you're
increase.
talking about the spending change, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
we're doing that because we can, because of the equalized pupil.
Yeah.
If
So
we
the-
hadn't done that, what would we have been bringing to the town?
Yeah. So that's, 227. So we're up 627. If we took away 400,000, we'd be 227. And 1% is 150,000. So it'd be a little less than 2%, right? 'Cause-
So we would still be up.
yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be probably like 1
What,
point.
and why, the first budget round we saw was down.
Yeah.
So what did we increase besides that?
Well, the pre-K, that was over 100,000, and the food, that was
I don't think
45.
salaries were loaded in.
And not all the salaries were, that's right.
So there was an adjustment.
Yeah, Jerry made a nice heads up to me that, I'm glad she did, that our salary configuration wasn't set up correctly on the first pass, so we did that. Normally we do a random check, and the random checks were all good, and then we found there was a series that it had just been configured wrong, so those were in as well.
So the other summarization in my head is that we're still up 7.9% on health insurance all the way
Yeah.
across. And we're contractually obligated with the staff for 1%.
I didn't look up to that, it was over 2%.
So, I mean, that's,
Yes, those are factors.
so it's still kind of a miraculous budget. Is there anything the principals wanted to point out that you guys put in or didn't ask for that you were thinking about? Or?
They wouldn't answer that.
I'm glad.
Things that they wouldn't answer. Yes.
Well, I'm thinking specifically, like we didn't do a couple of years ago anything with the White House. And then as soon as we decided not to do it, the roof leaked and we had to replace it anyway.
So that's an area where we felt like the 400,000 would be something that we would
Address that eventually.
So for Green Street, it would be the heating system would be a high priority, which would be addressed through the capital plan.
I mean, I think we all went through the budgets, prepared our, went through the process expecting this is going to be a pretty tight year, so we kept it pretty tight. You know, I think the things that we trimmed or shaved back a little bit, like technology and so forth, knowing that This wasn't a year, this was a good year to trim back, but large projects, like, for example, at Academy, we got this beautiful new boiler system, and it's been a warm winter, we're going to exceed the projected 90 tons of pellets, and I think significantly, and one reason is because the building's not insulated with single uninsulated glass walls throughout the building. For a building this size, we should not be burning energy. So things like that, which wouldn't be addressed in the budget per se, but in the capital plan down the road.
Most of mine were looking at capital plan issues and like building, thinking about energy efficiency of that upstairs where we have that glass block wall, and I think I have some, maybe, I'm hoping some extra money to maybe get somebody to come in this next year and to kind of, like an architectural or design firm, think about what some of our options are. So as we move forward in the capital plan, I can better present something that this is what it might cost to revamp that second floor.
But the snow no longer comes through the blocks, right?
Oh, well, the rain does. When it freezes, the snow melts because it sits on the blocks there a little bit. So it hasn't happened this year because the winter has been so different. But when you get a built up of snow and then that melts, it does come into the building.
So we're on about 5 minutes before we said we were going to end. One thing Frank asked us that we didn't talk about was whether we were comfortable with just giving this to the town or if we wanted to do the whole 30 pages. Any thoughts on that?
I would be comfortable with the summary.
I just don't know. I mean, when we meet with representatives, what they want, what people want. I'm comfortable with that summary, but is there a reason you were doing a larger document, or was that just a tradition?
Or will we go over the larger document when we meet with the reps? We'll have our meeting?
We could have copies available, although somebody will probably say if we do copies available, they'd want them earlier. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, I'm on the town finance committee. And I would recommend, I believe what the town does in the report is that they have a summary as the main thing that they look at and talk about, but the detail is available as well in the back of the book. So I think that would be advisable because there are a lot of people who want that level of detail about, the smallest things. And it's much easier to answer them if you can point to a page and say, as you can see here on this page, that's for, an extra box of pencils or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So.
It seemed like our meeting with the reps last year, people were very detailed.
They really had read that.
I think the summary is really helpful though to look at. So having both.
So do we want to think on that and vote on that next week? How's that? Anything else we should know? If I consider it one more document, we may or may not have
That
this.
is the bigger document. Let me hand it around just so you have it, and then you can decide.
Well, I think I like it.
Yeah. So you have it.
Here's the scissors.
And Bob.
Yes.
We have.
Okay. Is there anything else?
That's it.
So at this point, I would entertain a motion to adjourn for this meeting. And then we'll all go into Thursday. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.